It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across the USA, we are Red Eye Radio. We is me and him. How you doing?
How you doing? We're us. We're those guys.
Gary McNamara here, Eric over there.
Hi.
All right, now this is really, really interesting here. How fast this is changing. Almost 4/5, 80% of global CEOs surveyed by KPMG for a recent report predict their staff will be in the office every day in the next 3 years. 80% now, when it was taken earlier this year, 34% of company CEOs saw a fully in-office workforce.
Wow.
Meanwhile, only 17% of CEOs said their staff will be hybrid in 3 years, down from 46% earlier this year. KPMG's insights came from 1,300 CEOs at large global companies, 400 in the United States. CEOs increasingly favor a comprehensive return to office, but the need for flexibility still holds. Well, where? It doesn't sound like, I don't know where they get that from the numbers.
Yeah.
Maybe in a small percentage, 17%, but no, that's a major shift in just a few months. They found that these companies are willing to dole out incentives to achieve its face-to-face employee base. As many as 86% of the CEOs surveyed said they will reward employees who make an effort to come into the office. Oh, my gosh. It's like, who make an effort? I'm sorry, but that sort of I'm going to make an effort.
I'll look into it.
Yeah, I may come in. You may? All right, here's an extra 1,000. You did?
Wow. Well,
here's a cup of coffee.
What's changed in the last few months? The job market has tightened. People feel a lot less like they can go find another job pretty quickly than they did several months ago. And that's because the numbers tell the story. That's actually happened. The job market, there aren't near as many jobs available to people. You see more and more layoffs, and that makes people nervous, and that has companies also saying, we need the most out of the people we have. Because after that kind of tightening, then it gets to the layoff kind of thing. When you saw Walmart, I had no idea. Walmart saying, we need our corporate employees to be reporting to the office. They were still, up till recently, working from home, some of them. And they also changed the locations. They were like, well, we're going to be in Bentonville, and I forgot the other location. We're going to be basically in these two primary areas, and you're going to have to either move there, if you want to stay on. They're making it, to where people can move. But you see that, and then, of course, their biggest competitor is Amazon. Amazon doing the same thing. There are a number of jobs that were home-based jobs before COVID. So that part hasn't changed, and that has to do with, okay, are you going to rent a big, and I know a company actually, that rented a big, it used to be a grocery store building, for a call center. And now they realize, well, we need operators that are going to be all over the country, not just in the one location. They're going to have to be in different parts of the country. and it made sense for them to start working from home. There are a number of jobs. In fact, I have two family members that both have jobs that pre-COVID were work from home jobs. The overwhelming majority of jobs that if before COVID they weren't work from home, there was a reason. And there's a reason they're going to be going back to the office, and people are going to have very few things to say about it if the job market continues to tighten.
Well, you look at this, and I remember a year into COVID when they took the survey of people working at home, remote working, and 50% of them said they drank during the day while they were working.
Yeah.
And you look at, there are people that are self-starters.
Right.
And so self-starters can work alone.
Can work from anywhere.
Right. Everybody is not a self-starter.
Right.
Personalities are different. I think it comes down to two things. One thing, productivity. Yeah. And I think these CEOs believe, and I don't know if they did research on it, would be interesting to talk to CEOs on this list that said absolutely no, we're going to be hybrid, who changed their mind in just 6 months.
Yeah.
Why did they change their mind? I guarantee it's productivity. One of the things that came out of early on in COVID, remember the early studies said, wow, people are just 1% less productive. I don't know how you figure that out for an entire economy, but people were basically just 1% less productive early on with the remote working during COVID. And so you had companies saying, well, this is great because even if it's 1% less, we don't need the actual real estate that we have now. You know what we can save on real estate? We don't have to buy buildings. We don't have to rent. We can rent 90% less space. And even if there's a slight reduction in productivity, we still come out better because we don't have to pay for any of this.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Right.
Because that was the thought process at the time. Productivity in the CEOs' minds must be down so much. It has to be. Or they believe it is. Whether it reality is or not, I don't know, because I haven't seen any studies on it right now on the productivity from working at home and how it might have dropped since 2019. You'd have to make that comparison. That would be a pretty lengthy and probably expensive study, would it not? But I believe these CEOs believe that it's worth it to bring people back in over the next couple of years, if it's a tightening labor market, or you offer greater incentives to do it, because the productivity is so much greater inside. Now, I know there's going to be exceptions to the rule. I can imagine I'll get comments, no, I work from home and I'm just as productive. Not talking to you, because I'm sure people exist that are self-starters. In the radio business, if you're going to make it, you got to be a self-starter. Nobody can be leaning over you saying, are you doing your show prep today? Have you paid attention to what's going on in the news? You're working from home a lot. You only come in to do the radio show. How do I know that you're actually because you either do a damn good show or you don't. Right?
Yeah.
That's right. The reality in our business. You're either consistent in the quality of what you put on, or it's easily recognizable.
Yeah.
Because you've got well, in our case, dozens of people that are listening that are technically your bosses.
Yes, exactly.
Millions, I meant. Millions, I meant.
Yeah.
And so it becomes, pretty apparent.
I think Nate Bargatze was a comedian that said, like, for comedy, look, you can't be in comedy for 20 years without being funny. You get an immediate response, and it either works or it doesn't. And that's the case. By the way, interesting note, FoxNews.com, a piece that was published just 15 minutes ago from Ted Jenkins, an opinion piece. Here's how Biden-Harris inflation will make returning to the office wildly more expensive, by the way, for the employee, not the employers. I'm sure it's more expensive for employers, too. Real estate is more expensive. And then the sub headline: Did you really think you would be able to work from home forever? Again, Ted Jenkins, just minutes ago here at FoxNews.com. And it's an interesting piece as I was going through it here and scanning through it. But inflation, the cost of everything, right? So workers spend, on average, $51 per day when they go to the office, which includes $16 on lunch, $14 on commuting. Again, this is on average. $13 on breakfast and coffee, $8 on parking. By the way, none of that, I mean, commuting for me, gasoline, but I don't spend $14 a day. I don't spend a dime on parking. And then workers with pets also spend an additional $20 per day on pet care. Nope. And but, just talking about overall on the average.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into the meals like lunch and how much more expensive it is, snacks and coffee, your clothing, your work attire that you have to buy, and also dry cleaning to keep it looking nice. Child care, that's a big one. Your time costs, longer hours, commuting adds time to your day, which reduces your availability for personal activities, self-care, or family time, health and wellness, and all these things. But it is a good point in terms of where we were for those who were still, up until recently, are just now going back to the office post-COVID. And then you add the cost of everything to what you have to provide for yourself every day. It is going to be a jolt. And it is a direct response or direct result of the policies put in place by Biden and Harris. And that inflation is a big deal. But here's what I think may have happened with these CEOs who earlier this year said, the whole hybrid thing, and now they're much fewer of them are saying that. There was this negotiation because you were trying to attract and retain talent, especially in the tech industry. As more and more layoffs happened, and this is how it works, those CEOs realize they have greater leveraging power to tell people, well, sorry, there are fewer jobs for you to run to, so we're less concerned about retention at this point. I think, too, on the productivity going into COVID, all right, it only dropped 1%, and then people started realizing, hey, wait, I've got some booze over in the corner. And half of them started drinking, according to that survey, or not working to their full potential, not producing the way they did, and people started settling in. I think at first people were worried about keeping their job. Man, I got to be able to keep my job, so I really want to remain productive. And I think the psychology started setting in like, you know what? My boss isn't going to show up. I haven't even gotten out of my pajamas in 4 days. And I've been drinking every day. That was so bizarre to me. For those that don't know, you and I insisted that we come into the studio.
Yes, we did.
Yes. It was, and we had all the precautions in place. Our production staff still does. They're in another room completely. They avoid us at all costs anyway. So COVID was just another reason to avoid us. And so when we wanted, because we understood the dynamics of how, our little operation works. And if you start compromising on that, then you have to first say, I'm willing to compromise that. And we weren't. Well, then you start looking at it thinking, well, if they're not looking over my shoulder, this doesn't apply to all. I think a lot of people were still worried about their jobs throughout. But a number of people were clearly thinking, I can just have my cat walk across the keyboard and it looks like I'm sitting here at my computer. There are actual third-party things that you could buy to make it look like that you were sitting at your computer, that that you were using your keyboard and the whole thing. All of that has changed. Productivity wasn't the same. The CEOs now have greater leveraging because the job market has changed. You and I had said, though, at some point, everybody's going to get back to work. And by the way, they do write in this piece, Ted Jenkins at foxnews.com, in his piece that he put out just 21 minutes ago. Amazon just left a package on everyone's doorstep. Its CEO, Andy Jassy, is instructing corporate staffers to spend 5 days a week in the office beginning January 2nd, and it's not a request. They did that after Walmart was saying the same to their corporate employees. It's become clear. Work from home is all but over.
Well, it's simple. Whatever studies they've done, however they've done it, they believe productivity is down big time.
Yep.
Otherwise, they've got to pay for more real estate. So paying the real estate, they believe, is worth it because they'll get more productivity out of the worker being there.
And the job market being so tight, they know that they have the upper hand. The employers have the upper hand here because they don't have to worry about a talent retention the way they did before.
Right, but the major reason is productivity.
Well, no, but you still had to worry about retaining that talent even with productivity. If they were saying, I will jump, because it becomes extremely expensive to replace an employee. And so productivity is a huge part of it, but you have to add to it. It is a dynamic that has changed in recent months.
The productivity is the key to it, because if the employee is working at home and being productive.
I'm not saying it's not part of it. I'm saying what has changed in recent months is the job market, and that gives the employer the upper hand on that negotiation between talent retention and talent, deciding whether they're going to stay or not.
I think they're willing to take the risk a lot right now because, the job market has tightened, but the fact is it's productivity. The productivity wasn't there.
I think it's both.
Right, but it was.
That's what's changed in recent months.
I understand your point, but to me, that's secondary to the product. The productivity is what kicked it off. Our productivity's down. We got to do something. 866-90 Red Eye.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
We're still assessing the size of the impacts to agriculture and forestry. We know they're significant. We know there will be short-term impacts, and we also know that the impacts on farmer livelihoods will last for potentially years.
Agriculture Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation Robert Bonney, along with federal officials Tuesday, discussing recovery efforts in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene in the southeast. USDA contribution in these efforts include non-ag focus on cleanup and food and nutrition security to those impacted, as well as farm-oriented areas such as standing up USDA service centers impacted by power loss or flooding from the storm, including emergency staffing to handle applications for assistance. Crop insurance and emergency conservation programs will also be a focus of USDA in post-Helene recovery efforts. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90 Red Eye on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Coming up following the bottom of the hour, we'll hear from a former SEC chief who says, cutting rates? What are you talking about? We've got some inflationary problems still coming right now.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio. from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Download our Red Eye Radio app today, and you can listen when and where you choose. This was an interesting discussion on CNBC yesterday. The guest was former SEC Chair Jay Clayton about the vice presidential debate, the talk on the economy, and where we are right now when it comes to raising rates. And two things that have just happened, because his point is the Fed now has a tougher job today than they did a week ago. And two reasons. One, the increased conflict in the Middle East. By the way, that happened. The next day, my gas price is up 30 cents a gallon. And the port strike. Mm-hmm. And here's part of the conversation that he had.
Gary, what did you think on the economy, the issues that came out there?
So I think on the economy, again, I'm not sure we learned a lot. I don't think any new policy was put out. In fact, the only new policy that's been put out since we were here last is the Harris-Walz team did put out their 82-page economic platform, which is quite interesting, and maybe we should spend some time talking about that.
Well, let's do it.
But what we've learned, and I think what they continue to do, is they continue to reiterate that what you've seen in the past is what you're going to get in the future. So what you saw from the Trump administration during their 4 years, their policy of lower taxes, very accommodative from the regulatory standpoint, trying to grow the economy. They continue to reiterate that. From the Harris-Walz team, they put out 82 pages of new and bigger entitlements. Like, I could go through the list, but I'm not sure we have enough time. We're going to talk about new housing credits, small business credits, forgiveness of student loans, higher inflation, enhanced child credits, preschool credits, long-term care credits, paid family leave credits, government control of health care, price controls. I can keep going.
No,
the list keeps going
you're
on.
right. I think you're absolutely right that there's a big change, but I would say it's the same from both campaigns. Because I would say former President Trump has laid out a pretty long litany of things on the campaign trail that he would spend on. And we're not looking at a whole lot of ways to raise it outside of tariffs. So I think you're right. I think both of these campaigns are talking about pretty aggressive shifts from what we've seen in the past.
No, I think this is exactly what Bidenomics is. I think the Harris-Walz team laid out in 82 pages Bidenomics. So now we can call it Harrisonomics. And I think what you've seen from the Trump-Vance team is you've seen a reiteration of what they did in the past. They continue to talk about lowering taxes. They do continue to talk about tariffs. We've talked about tariffs, where they're effective and where they're not effective. They continue to talk about growing the economy. Growing the economy so we have a higher GDP, so everyone gets raised up, so we can grow wages, we can grow the entire size. And I think that's the difference. One is grow the economy so all boats rise. The other is redistribution of the economy.
The two things that really strike me now, though, is we are faced with massive news issues that we've been talking about all morning. One would be what's happening in the Middle East. The second would be the strike with the longshoremen. And maybe we should start with the easier one first, being the longshoremen.
Yeah. So we were talking, Jay Powell, I think everybody's giving him high marks for where we are in trying to land this. What's not in the textbooks? A port strike. What's not in the textbooks? Increased conflict in the Middle East, energy price shock, if that comes or not. These things are not there, and both of them are inflationary.
Yeah.
And so what do you do if you're at the Fed? You've done very well here. You've kind of brought demand down. We're going to head towards soft landing, and all of a sudden you have these two inflationary forces hitting you in the face. The Fed has a tougher job today than they did a week ago.
Yep. You know what one of the big stories is about the head of the longshoremen's union and his the investigations, that they've been had, and the Fed's gone after him twice for, mob-related activities, but the fact that he makes $900,000 a year. If prices start going up because of this, that's not going to be looked at. That's exactly, you're not going to have anybody happy, because that gets into the fact of, wait a minute, you're trying to say that you're just a working man's union. You're making $900,000 a year.
Yeah, the New York Post putting the picture of his house and his car out there. But you're at a situation where right now you're probably not going to get much sympathy outside the union itself. It's going to be, look, everybody's trying to do what they can do to make ends meet. And when you hear that on the upper end, the wages per hour of where they would go, a 77% pay increase over the term of the contract, people look at that and say, you should be happy with your $39 an hour. Well, and it's hard to build that kind of sympathy. When Walmart employees were getting, what were they getting, $7 an hour to start, and everybody's, oh my gosh, can't believe it, look how hard they work and everything else. And then Walmart bumped it to $10 an hour to start. I don't know where they are, $10 or $12 an hour now to start. And it's an entry-level wage. But still, people were familiar with that going, oh, okay, come on, you need to do more. And Walmart had to adjust based on a little backlash from their actual customer base. When it comes to unions and this kind of negotiating, most people can't relate to that kind of situation. They just can't.
As the Wall Street Journal points out, most workers would jump at a 50% pay increase that the longshoreman union has been offered over 6 years.
Right.
But they're demanding a 77% pay raise to $69 an hour, which is more than West Coast longshoremen who earn roughly $233,000 a year on average in wages and overtime, plus $99,000 in benefits. The ILA is demanding bigger container royalties, which is a union welfare program that pays longshoremen regardless of whether they work. About half the union members work on any given day owing to technology and improved port efficiency. The ILA is also demanding a wholesale ban on automation. No automation at all. American ports are less efficient than most in the world owing to union work rules and restrictions on automation. Unlike other private unions, longshoremen don't have to worry that their demands will bankrupt employers or cause them to lose business. Volkswagen can't import European-made cars by truck. U.S. businesses and consumers foot the bill for higher port labor cost and reduce efficiency. So much for the administration's boast about fighting inflation and bolstering supply chains. Mr. Biden could invoke the Taft-Hartley Act to force a cooling-off period for more negotiations, as George W. Bush did in 2002 to end an 11-day walkout. But Mr. Biden said on Sunday, I don't believe in Taft-Hartley, so he will not upset his union allies and their voter turnout operation. The ILA is exploiting its leverage with labor-friendly administration to pressure the ports to cut a rich deal to avoid the economic pain before the election. That also seems to be the strategy of Boeing machinists in the Pacific Northwest that are heading into their third week of strike after rejecting a 30% pay increase over 4 years.
Look, there's no love lost between Joe Biden and his party and his party's leadership. So I wouldn't be surprised if depending on how long this strike goes on, if the party goes to him and says, hey, you're wrecking it. You got to do something before Election Day. Because if we were told that, okay, things would be fairly stable if they were out for as long as 3 weeks, but anything beyond 3 weeks, and people are going to start noticing shortages. I don't know that it would take 3 weeks. I look at the supply chain and wonder how they get by with, 3 weeks. You're talking about, again, they said it's because the shippers had actually ahead of this, anticipating this, had stocked up. But let's say it is 3 weeks, and it goes on, it gets close to that 3-week period. I could see the Democratic Party, the party leadership going to Joe Biden saying, you may not have a political future, but we're in election season right now. The union knows that. You're going to have to do something. The problem is they've already got other unions that are voting for Trump. The membership is voting for Trump over at the Teamsters. Those members, the largest chunk of them, are voting for Trump. I don't know if there's a win for Democrats. But maybe they're trying to salvage everything they can. But you don't help with the union members if you impose a cooling off period. I don't know where the win is. So I don't know. I could see if they believe it's going to be a problem on the election, because forget the members. If the American people are feeling the pain from a strike that's gone on too long,
they don't care.
Then the party's not going to care anyway. I don't think they care to begin with, but the Democratic Party's not going to care anyway. They're going to put pressure, I think, on the White House and tell Biden, you don't have a political future. We've got to make sure there's not a shortage going into the election. Because if there is, forget it. If he has the power to put that on hold, then they're going to force. I think they would pressure him. The party leadership would pressure him to do that. Just imagine if we get 3 weeks in and there's no solution, and we're getting closer and closer with early voting wide open by that point.
Well, if Israel strikes back, expect gas prices to go up even more.
Yep.
Like I said, the day it happened, I went by and it was like $2.59. Went by the next day, $2.89, 30 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, sorry, California.
Yeah. These are all of the things that you don't want on the plate while people are actually voting. That's unacceptable. And they'll have to throw out their loyalty to the union. They're going to have to throw that aside. It may be lost anyway. You can't have it. You can't have a supply chain issue causing shortages with the media reporting on that over and over again while people are voting. You just can't.
Yeah, because the story gets bigger this week. It keeps getting bigger and bigger, and next week it'll get bigger.
The longer it goes.
They're still out. They're still out.
Yep.
Shortages starting here. And then if prices start rising, or there's shortages, visible shortages of product in the supermarkets like we had during COVID, not good.
Nope. And again, based on what's going on right now and what they're asking for at the union, hard to build sympathy for that.
Well, it's because
But they've already got an offer on the table of 50%, as they make the point here in the Wall Street Journal.
Well, your self-interest, fine. My self-interest.
Exactly. You're stopping the shipment of goods.
And that's because we have felt inflation already. And if we see it again and you have somebody directly to blame, they will.
Especially when they've already been offered a 50% raise.
Yep. And I think, triple the amount into their retirement plans.
Right, into their pensions.
Into their pensions, yeah.
Yeah.
866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Well, we're just about a month away, aren't we?
It's crazy. It seems like it's been light years to get here.
I know.
And it seems like in some ways that's still so far away, but then you look at how quick everything is moving. I mean, we're at October 3rd here. We now are getting down to, what are we now at, 4.5 weeks? Before the election, and the Harris campaign, word coming from the Harris campaign that they may reconsider their approach with media interviews. They may be doing more. Why now? Why start now?
It's not going to help them if they keep doing. I saw one of the interviews that she did yesterday. It was the same answers.
Yeah.
And you did see that the biggest criticism, even from Democrats, about Walz, he didn't answer any questions.
Right.
People have figured it out. My thing is this the election where, as I've always said, where my dad is wrong? Mm-hmm. I told it to my dad the other day. He thought that was great. Well, Dad, is this the election where you're wrong, where people don't want to be BS'd anymore, where they actually want the answers because reality's hit?
Have we hit an era, though, that where you can't really get away with the lie anymore? You know, because in the abstract, you could lie about what you're going to do.
Right.
And how things might happen and issues we might face. But on reality, you can't lie about it.
Yeah, people feel it.
Yeah.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.